Do you feel like you're being trolled right now? The fantasy world rejoiced with the return of Cooper Kupp last week, and then they took away Justin Jefferson from us? What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone's doing well out there. Today we're talking about our wide receivers that we're going to start and sit for week 6 of fantasy football, and there are injuries all over the place right now in the NFL. A lot of teams scrambling to try to find a solid starting lineup for week 6 of fantasy football. What's it gonna be like in week 12? Now, before we get into every matchup, I said in a video last week, I believe it was the Tailgate Show, I teased the audience and said, listen, you're going to want to tune into my wide receiver start sit video because I have something to give away I probably think you're going to want. Well, that time has come right now because this is the wide receiver start sit video. So I'm going to be giving away a signed Jalen Hurts jersey right here. This thing is awesome. Right here, got the certificate of authenticity. You see the signature right there on the one. A lot of people are going to be wanting this jersey. But maybe you're asking yourself, how do I get said jersey? Jake, that's a great question. It's super simple. Hit the like button down below, leave a comment so I know you're interested, and then be sure to have your free account signed up through Pristine Auction. It doesn't cost you anything. Just be sure to use referral code HEADLINERS when you do so. Once you have that free account signed up, you are good to go on all of our future giveaways. Then, once we hit our like goal on this video, which I'm going to set at, let's do 3,000 likes on this video, and I'll pick a random winner from down below in the comment section. But really, after this show is over, you have to head over to pristineauction.com. Just scroll through their site for a few minutes. You will not believe the amount of straight fire they have up there right now. Plus, if you signed up for that new account, there's going to be a coupon in there for you to get a discount off your first item if you can go out there and win an auction. It's a lot of fun. I always have the 10-minute auctions up. You get some great deals, some jerseys for like 40 bucks signed. Absolutely sign me up for that. But let's go ahead and dive into some football action now. We have a Thursday night game between the Denver Broncos and Kansas City Chiefs. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot of safety in this matchup, right? But we'll start off with the Denver Broncos side of the football. And last week kind of went as planned, right? Courtland Sutton got sauced up by Sauce Gardner. Jeudy would see a bump in targets. Well, that both happened, but it still wasn't enough for Jerry Jeudy. Had 7 targets, 6 receptions, and 50 yards. Didn't help a whole lot of people in fantasy football. In fact, Adam Troutman and Samaje Perine had the same amount of targets as Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy had. How does that even make any sense whatsoever? But now they get a matchup this week going up against Kansas City, who a lot of people still don't want to believe in their defense, but they're good. They're allowing only 25.4 fantasy points per game right now to opposing wide receivers. That is 9th fewest in the NFL. Now, most of the injuries on this team are on the defensive side of the football, which we can tell every week by the amount of yards they're giving up, but there's also a chance that Javonte Williams will return this week as well. Let's be completely honest here. No one in this matchup is exactly quote-unquote safe. Courtland Sutton, gonna be pretty boom or bust. Jerry Jeudy, he hasn't really shown us much of a ceiling here in 2023 thus far. This is a tough matchup on the road in Kansas City on Thursday Night Football. I don't love it. If I had to take a stab on one of these guys, I'm leaning towards Courtland Sutton due to his touchdown upside. But like I said, neither one are safe for sure. As for Kansas City, nothing new here, right? It's the same thing it's been for weeks. No one can even tell me right now who the leading receiver is on this team without having to Google it. I mean, no one is averaging more than 5 targets a game. No one's averaging over 3 receptions a game. No one's averaging any more than 43 yards receiving in a game. But they're going up against the Denver Broncos defense, and this defense is weaker than single-ply toilet paper in a public restroom. They allow over 30.7 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, which is 12th most in the league. Travis Kelce, as of right now, is practicing, but still limited. One of these guys, one of the wide receivers this week for Kansas City, is going to score a big touchdown. I just feel it, but there is no way to know who. If I had to guess for one this week, I'm going to go with Rashee Rice. And that could be entirely wrong. It could be Justin Watson. It could be Sky Moore. It could be MV. Who knows who the hell it's going to be in Kansas City each and every week. That is the biggest issue we have with this overall team in the wide receiver position. It's like playing weekly whack-a-mole. But then, because we all like to continue to wake up earlier than we normally do on a Sunday, how about another game in London between the Baltimore Ravens and Tennessee Titans? And let's go ahead and just start off with the huge day that could have been for Zay Flowers in week 5, but no. Dude tripped over his own 2 feet, fell onto his butt, and missed out on a huge touchdown reception. That's fantasy football right there for you, right? But he did lead the team in targets with 11 and yards with 73. He continues to be the only viable wide receiver there is in this Baltimore offense. But this drop that he suffered last week, he wasn't alone. There were 7 dropped passes by wide receivers in week 5. Lamar Jackson was out there throwing dimes and no one was catching it. You have to think that's something they're going to make a conscious effort on moving forward, and it only has to improve. As of right now, Zay Flowers is averaging 9.5 fantasy points per game, and he's inside the top 36 overall at the position. Now they're going up against Tennessee, who allows 32.5 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. That's 8th most in the league. There's no one of really any fantasy relevance that is hurting right now in this offense. And Zay Flowers continues to still be a pretty decent wide receiver 3 option if you play 3 wide receivers, or even a flex play this week. If you're dealing with bye weeks or injuries, I have no issue starting Zay Flowers once again this week. The bigger days are coming. He's 2 hands, Zay. 2 hands. 1 foot after the other. Right, left, right, hands. Catch it. Super simple, right? I know I can say that from my desk, but I believe in you. Anyway, let's move down to the Tennessee Titans. Let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins now. And just like Baltimore, there's only one wide receiver worth even mentioning here in Tennessee, and it is DeAndre Hopkins. He's finally getting healthy, and he's getting used a lot, which is great. Last week, 11 targets, 8 catches, 140 yards, no touchdowns, but that was against Indianapolis last week. He just saw double-digit targets for the first time since week 1 as well, and that is a great sign. He also played the most snaps he's seen in a game this year with 83%. But now he goes against Baltimore. And Baltimore's defense it's a lot better than what they saw last week from the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Baltimore does allow 27.1 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. We know Treylon Burks, he's still banged up. Does it even matter? He doesn't do much when he's on the field anyway. This is an offense that's not going to throw a lot of touchdowns, and it's going to keep their ceilings a little bit lower. But if he can continue to see those double-digit targets each week, that's something we're going to talk about a lot in this show, by the way. If we're getting double-digit targets each week, you're almost an automatic must start at the wide receiver position. Remember, we're looking for potential opportunity, right? That's the only thing you can do in fantasy football. Try to find the players with the best opportunity. Like Zay Flowers last week. I love Zay Flowers last week. I saw the opportunity for a huge target share. He got it. It just didn't happen, but that's what we're looking for, are those opportunities for those big-time targets, and DeAndre Hopkins is definitely trending the right way to be more of a low-end wide receiver 2 flex play as well. But now, let's head into the afternoon games. First one up, the Washington Commandos and Atlanta Falcons. We'll start off with Washington. And can anyone tell me what Terry McLaurin has done to Sam Howell to piss him off? Only 5 targets. 5 targets for the whole game in a game in which you trailed from start to finish. And on top of that, a game in which Sam Howell had over 50 pass attempts. And I can basically say the same thing for Jahan Dotson, only 5 targets as well. Heck, Logan Thomas himself had more targets than Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson combined in week 5. Tell me that makes a lot of sense. Now they're going up against Atlanta, one of the better defenses in the NFL. And they only allow 22.2 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, and that is 6th fewest in the league. Now, at some point, Terry McLaurin is going to explode. He's going to have one of those big-time games. It's going to happen at some point this year. When is that going to happen? Well, he's going to need more than 5 targets a game in order to have a better chance at that happening. Overall, they're fairly healthy on offense, but at this time, the safest option as a pass-catching option in Washington seems to be Curtis Samuel. He's got back-to-back games with a touchdown, has had at least 7+ targets now in back-to-back games. I don't really understand why, but Sam Howell is really looking for Logan Thomas and Curtis Samuel all over the field. Now, I have no issues in starting Curtis Samuel over Jahan Dotson, but you need to understand with Terry McLaurin. If you choose to sit Terry McLaurin, just accept the fact that there's a chance that he could go off on any given week on your bench. Skill-wise, he is one of the best wide receivers in football. And I'm not sitting here telling you that he's some absolute must-start every single week right now with the way they're playing, but you need to realize if you're going to bench him, you take the risk of him popping off on your bench. But then we'll go down to Atlanta. And honestly, I'll talk about Drake London. I don't want to trust Drake London. I don't want to trust Desmond Ridder. but I just got to sit here and do my job and report some of the facts, right? Drake London now has 10 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games played. The other 2 games, however, woof, they were bad, low single digits. Atlanta also just added another wide receiver in Van Jefferson coming over from the Los Angeles Rams, but I don't expect him to be a factor just yet. I don't even think he's been in town long enough to get a cup of coffee. But what's crazy is Kyle Pitts and Drake London right now have crazy similar stats. Kyle Pitts actually has right now 32 targets for 18 receptions and 208 yards. Drake London, 31 targets, 17 catches, 204 yards. Eerily similar, but damn, this is a great matchup for the Atlanta Falcons. The Washington defense can't stop anyone here lately. They're allowing 38.4 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. That's 3rd most in the NFL. They've allowed over 273 yards passing now in 3 of the last 4 ball games. Overall, Atlanta is fairly healthy on offense, and this has never been a Drake London issue. He is a very talented wide receiver. This has been a passing game, quarterback play type issue for the Atlanta Falcons. I can't just look at 1 week and say, well, they fixed it. This is going to be an offense that has peaks and valleys at the wide receiver position. There's always going to be a little bit of risk involved. But if we're looking for those good matchups, this is definitely one of them for Drake London. Which will then take us over to Chicago for the Bears and the Vikings, and we'll address this here at the start. We're going to rip it off like it's a Band-Aid, and then we're going to move on. But man, it sucks to not have Justin Jefferson out there for the next few weeks. I am crying on the inside, trust me. But this has to be a huge opportunity for both Addison and Osborne. Kind of sounds like a law firm, right? 8771900, Addison and Osborne. Anyway, sorry about that. Got off on a tangent. But anyway, you have to think that their immediate target share is going to increase with no Justin Jefferson. But it's not enough to make them absolute weekly must-starts, because you also have to think that TJ Hawkinson is going to get a bump in this offense as well. However, with all the bye weeks and injuries, I kind of look at KJ Osborne and Jordan Addison as solid flex plays while Justin Jefferson is not on the field, especially in good matchups like this one, going up against the Chicago Bears, who allow over 30.7 fantasy points per game, 11th most in the league. Outside of Justin Jefferson, though, they're fairly healthy on offense. Now, not every matchup is going to be this great, and these guys may not always be that viable option, like I said. However, we've seen KJ Osborne go on a tear in this offense before. Rumors out there are saying he's going to adopt the Justin Jefferson role while he's injured. That could be great. We could see another huge tear coming. However, I'm kind of tempering expectations here a little bit, being that there is so much unknown. We're looking at flex plays at best, guys that are going to be ranked probably somewhere between wide receiver 24 and 36 or so. But then we get down to Chicago, and it's DJ Moore. And DJ Moore is a perfect example of fantasy football overreactions, right? And I really hope that I can remember this example for years to come to give to people when they're overreacting, because everybody was jumping ship after a couple weeks of DJ Moore and Justin Fields. Now, DJ Moore is the current wide receiver 3 overall in fantasy football. He's scored over 11 fantasy points now in 4 straight ball games. He's 5th in the NFL in receiving yards. He's 1st in the NFL in yards per reception. He's tied for 1st in touchdowns, and he's 3rd overall in yards after the catch. And now on top of all of that, he gets a matchup to go against the Minnesota Vikings, who allow the 4th most points to fantasy wide receivers at 38.2 points per game. The run game in Chicago is banged up. Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson, Travis Homer, they're all hurting, which means we could see a little bit more running from Justin Fields as well. But when you have a player with the proven ceiling that we've seen from DJ Moore and still a fairly safe floor, we see that by him scoring 11 plus fantasy points in 4 straight games, it is really hard to not have him in your lineup each and every week. He's a player that can win you your matchup. Maybe he did just last week, but he's also a player that if he has a bad game, still doesn't absolutely tank your chances at winning. DJ Moore is someone that a lot of people are going to rely upon for many weeks in fantasy football. How about we go down to Cincinnati for the Bengals and the Seahawks? Now we'll start off on the Seattle side of the football, and they're fresh off their bye week, and I hope they figured out how to get this passing game going. DK Metcalf himself has been pretty solid. He's scoring double digits in all 4 of the games he's played this season, averaging right around 12 fantasy points per game, nothing huge. Tyler Lockett, on the other hand, been a little bit more boom or bust. Hasn't had over 7 fantasy points in a game since week 2, and that kind of hurts. You gotta blame the run game, though, here in Seattle. It's just been working so well, especially around the goal line, that they don't need to throw as many touchdowns, and that's really lowering the ceiling of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Now they get a matchup going up against Cincinnati. They allow 26.2 fantasy points per game. That's 10th fewest in the league. The knee injury that Geno suffered prior to the bye week seems to be good to go. He should be good this week. It's all really just going to depend on who can get the lead early on here in this ball game. If Cincinnati jumps out early, we should be good. We should see a lot of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. If Seattle gets an early lead, I'm expecting them to run the football a butt ton just to keep the ball away from Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and that Bengals offense. We kind of need Cincinnati to put their foot on the gas early, get a lead, so we can really utilize DK and Tyler Lockett. As for Jamar Chase, I think we already know we start this guy every single week because he's always open every single play. It seems like, anyway. Last week he was 19 targets, 15 receptions, 192 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's the second game over the last 3 weeks that we've seen Jamar Chase get 15 plus targets in a game. Now, at this point of this recording, we don't know about the availability of T. Higgins. Is he going to play or not? If he does play, is he going to be limited? Because I could definitely see Jamar Chase having another big day if we don't have T. Higgins on the field. I also love to see Joe Burrow actually looking a little bit healthy in week 5. Ran the ball there, had a 10-yard rush, really seemed to be moving pretty well, and that's exactly what we've been waiting to see from Joe Burrow. Now they're going up against Seattle, and it is a great matchup. They allow 39 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, second most in the NFL. Really waiting to find out about T. Higgins. We've seen T. Higgins in the past be limited play, but hardly play on game day. Over his career, he just really seems to be one of those players that if he's limited heading into the ball game, just doesn't seem to perform well most weeks in fantasy football. This one right now, at this time, is all about Jamar Chase, and for sure, we're going to fire him up, and we'll just pay attention to T. Higgins as the week progresses, so be sure to stay tuned to that. How about now we move down to Cleveland for the Browns and the San Francisco 49ers. We'll start off with San Francisco, and here we are in a good old-fashioned defensive slugfest between these two teams. 2 of the top 3 defenses overall in the NFL, but we really can't put anything past the San Francisco offense at this point, right? I mean, they can beat you so many different ways. Ayuk with the big plays down the field. Debo racking up those extra yards. Kittle in the red zone. CMC everywhere in between. And we still have a quarterback that is vastly underrated in Brock Purdy. That kid is special. If you don't think so, it's time to just accept it. But on paper, this isn't a great matchup, right? Because Cleveland only allows 13.5 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. But they faced the likes of an injured Joe Burrow in week 1, Kenny Pickett, Ryan Tannehill. I mean, they were absolutely abused by Lamar Jackson, so why can't San Francisco do the same thing? A lot of people were worried about them going up against Dallas last week, and look how that turned out. I can't put anything past this offense. They're overall fairly healthy, and until we find out what this team's weakness is, you have to continue to start majority of these guys each and every week, especially since we haven't been able to find a team that's really been able to shut down this San Francisco offense in quite some time. All these guys, just great fantasy football options. On the other side, though, we got Amari Cooper. Now, typically, I would be looking forward to starting Amari Cooper coming out of the bye week, but this week he has the chips stacked against him. Deshaun Watson is still hurting and more than likely will not play. It could be PJ Walker under center at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, and I don't love that in a tough matchup going up against San Francisco. Now, this defense allows 27.9 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, which is somewhat average in the league. But this offensive line in Cleveland is beat up as well, and I don't really see them being able to hold back that pass rush of San Francisco. That's going to force PJ Walker to make things happen quickly and could force turnovers. It's also not going to allow Amari Cooper to get open down the field. This is going to be one of those uphill battles for Amari Cooper. There's a lot of risk involved with starting him this week, especially if he doesn't have Deshaun Watson. But now we'll dive down to Houston for the Texans and the Saints. We'll start off on the New Orleans side of the football, and who really knows what to believe in New Orleans, right? How hurt is Derek Carr? How hurt is Chris Olave? Are things better than they seem? Are they worse than we're being told? Olave had a pre-game rumor of an ankle injury. They said it was fine. He went ahead and played. He played 79% of the snaps. but saw a season low in targets with only 5, and only turned that into 2 receptions for 12 yards and a touchdown. Now, the game was out of hand. However, the concerning part for me and Chris Olave is over the last 2 weeks, he's only averaging 5 yards per reception. And to compare that how he started the season, he was almost up to 14 yards per reception. So that is a huge drop off right there, with Carr not going deeper down the field as consistently as he was. Now they get to go against Houston, and they allow only 19.6 fantasy points per game, 3rd fewest in the league. We still haven't seen Michael Thomas score in double digits this year, despite seeing decent targets each week. There's multiple injuries on the offensive line, and Juwan Johnson also questionable to play. This offense just doesn't look right since the Derek Carr injury and the return of Alvin Kamara. A lot of people are forgetting about that as well. We're not seeing the shots down the field as often, and that definitely hurts the upside of Chris Olave. He started this season as more of like a top 10, top 12 guy. As of right now, more of a top 24 play. How about now the Houston Texans? We got Nico Collins, we got Tank Dell, and let's hope for a Nico Collins bounce back here in week 6. Tank Dell currently in concussion protocol. We're unsure of his status as of right now. That could mean more Nico Collins this week. Now, Nico struggled last week, but that was expected. He was barely inside my top 30 rankings because of that matchup going up against Atlanta. That defense in Atlanta was really good, and you saw why with Nico just last week. Now, on paper, this seems to be a tough matchup for them this week as well. But have the Saints just not been tested? They've also only faced Ryan Tannehill, Bryce Young, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Mac Jones. This test is probably going to be bigger than any one of the ones they've already faced this season, so we're going to find out if this defense is for real or if they've just benefited from poor play from their opponents. Now, like I said, we're also watching the availability of Tank Dell. He could be a flex option if he's cleared fully this weekend. CJ Stroud has also proven to perform way better at home, and Robert Woods hasn't done anything with the targets he's gotten, so I'm not overly worried about him right now. At this time, it's the Nico Collins show once again in Houston. How about the Indianapolis Colts and Jacksonville Jaguars? For the Colts, a lot of this is going to come down to what the mustache can do for you, because there's no Anthony Richardson this week, which seems to really hurt Michael Pittman and help Josh Downs. The target share of Josh Downs dramatically increases with Gardner Minshew under center. And we just saw that last week when Josh Downs led the team in receiving with 6 catches for 97 yards. Now, that doesn't absolutely bury Michael Pittman, but it's going to limit his ceiling weekly for sure, because now he has to split more targets with Josh Downs, which makes Michael Pittman a little bit more touchdown dependent. Now they're going up against Jacksonville, though. They're a middle-of-the-pack defense against wide receivers, allowing 30.3 fantasy points per game. We already mentioned that we're not going to have Anthony Richardson, and we're not going to have him for multiple weeks, so we need to pay close attention to these games to see if Gardner Minshew is going to be a viable option for us to continue to start these wide receivers going forward. It's also a revenge-style game for Gardner Minshew. Don't forget, he came into the league with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now he's going to be on the road in Jacksonville. He's going to want to show out against his former home crowd as well. Plus, I'm expecting a little bit more Jonathan Taylor week by week. How about Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk for the Jacksonville Jaguars? We finally had a week where both Jacksonville wide receivers finished inside the top 24. A solid week 5 matchup for them going up against Buffalo just last week, but we need more touchdowns. We need TDs in this offense. Can I get a hell yeah if we're looking for more TDs out there? Both of these guys are averaging 7+ targets a game. Both are averaging over 11 fantasy points per contest, and I'm really hoping that some of that bad luck that we've talked about here for the first month of the season is finally starting to turn around. They're getting a great opportunity this week as well to continue that momentum going up against Indianapolis. They allow the 9th most points to opposing wide receivers at 31.9 per game. We don't know about Zay Jones as of right now. He's still questionable to play, but these two faced off back in week 1. They've already played each other this season. In that game, Calvin Ridley went for over 100 yards and a touchdown, but that was also the game that Christian Kirk wasn't really involved to start the season. A lot has changed since then. Christian Kirk has started to get more targets consistently than Calvin Ridley. You have to expect that both of them are going to be involved this week, and that's why I look at them as lower risk plays here in week 6. But now we're going to head down to Miami for the Dolphins and the Panthers, my Manscaped matchup of the week. And if you haven't checked out the products at manscaped.com here recently, you're missing out because a new one just dropped. It's the Lawnmower 5.0 2.0 Ultra. It's the great lawnmower that you already know everything about, but now they've added this interchangeable electric razor top head that has absolutely taken things to the next level. We want you to go check it out, but we want you to get it for a discount, so be sure to use referral code HEADLINERS at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Go check that out as soon as this show is over. But now let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. And honestly, the reason I made this my Manscaped matchup is because of Adam Thielen. Dude needs a little bit more respect because he's currently the wide receiver 10 overall in fantasy football through the first 5 weeks of the season, and not too many people expected that. Who did? I expected him to be pretty good this year. We're seeing it right now on the field. He's averaging almost 16 fantasy points per game, has 8+ targets now in 4 straight ball games, and has touchdowns in 3 of his last 4. He's also had 100+ yards receiving in 2 of his last 3 ball games, been a super solid and safe wide receiver, especially in PPR formats. Now, no, I don't hate DJ Chark either, but he's just a little bit more touchdown dependent. Only one time so far this season has he had over 50 yards receiving. But now they get a matchup going up against Miami, who's allowing 30.5 fantasy points per game. No other major injuries on the offense other than the offensive line, still a bit banged up, and Miles Sanders, but the passing game is good to go. But here's where I really like Adam Thielen. It's because Miami scores on everyone. It's kind of just like what they do, which means Carolina is going to have to continue to throw to keep pace. Thus, Thielen being the safest option thus far in this offense is going to be the guy that I'm willing to roll out first here in Carolina. DJ Chark, a little bit more of a Hail Mary type play if you're looking for somebody in a flex spot, if you're dealing with a lot of bye week problems or injuries. Adam Thielen, though, dude, I love to see Adam Thielen producing. Everybody wrote him off as being too old and going to a team that wasn't any good. Adam Thielen out there balling out. Speaking of balling out, what about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle? More so Tyreek Hill. I get it. But with this Miami offense, you want to get some part of it into your fantasy lineups each and every week if you possibly can. They have 4 or 5 guys that can win you your matchup basically all by themselves. Now, I know a lot of people wanted more from Jalen Waddle. I understand, but stay patient. He just had a season high in targets with 10, receptions with 5, and got his first touchdown of the season. Bigger days are coming for Jalen Waddle, even though this is a tougher matchup. Going up against Carolina, they allow only 22.9 fantasy points per game. That's 7th fewest in the league. But we also just saw Devon Achane go down for a couple weeks, which don't be surprised if that means we see a little bit more Jalen Waddle in the meantime. But ask yourself this. What is worse for your fantasy football team anyway? Is it starting Jalen Waddle and him getting 11 points on your team? Or is it sitting him and having him score 25 on your bench? I just can't sit the playmakers of the Miami Dolphins. How about now we go down to Las Vegas for the Raiders and the Patriots? We'll start off for the Patriots side of the football. We went from the best offense in the league in Miami to the worst one here in New England. By far the lowest scoring team in the NFL. No true wide receiver one. Horrific quarterback play. No one who's fantasy viable. We're not starting anyone anytime soon in New England. For Las Vegas, here we go with the Jakobi Meyers revenge game, right? Going back up against the Patriots, the team he played for the last few years. But don't forget, Jimmy G and head coach Josh McDaniels also have those New England ties as well. What's weird is how this offense in Las Vegas is really operating here as of late. The sporadic usage of Davante Adams, not overly utilizing their tight ends, basically ignoring Hunter Renfrow. Jakobi Meyers, on the other hand, is about as safe as they've come in this offense. He may not have the ceiling of a Davante Adams, but he's seen 10+ targets now in 3 of the 4 games he's played this season. Now they're going up against New England, an overall tougher defense, even though we can't really tell that the last few weeks. They allow 26.9 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Overall, fairly healthy in Las Vegas, but as much as week 5 sucked for Davante Adams, where he only got 4 targets, we have to know that will not happen weekly. Davante Adams is a mainstay in your fantasy lineup. Jakobi Meyers, though, he's been a nice surprise and a decent flex play almost each and every week he's in the lineup. Which will then take us down to Tampa Bay for the Bucs and the Lions. And for the Lions, here's to hoping we get back Amon-Ra St. Brown in week 6. Now, Dan Campbell has already come out and said that there's a pretty good chance that he returns this week. Even though Josh Reynolds didn't do bad in his absence, he had 4 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. We didn't see much of Jameson Williams last week, but I really expect them to ramp him up each week, getting more and more playing time. Only played 47% of the snaps just last week. A lot of that, in part, because of the play of Sam Laporta, the rookie tight end who's absolutely tearing things up, and he's become become a safe weekly option each week for Jared Goff. But now they're going up against Tampa Bay, and they allow 27.7 fantasy points per game, right around the league average. We know that Amon-Ra St. Brown dealing with that injury could come back, but what about Jahmyr Gibbs? Does it even matter if Jahmyr Gibbs comes back? Because even when he's fully healthy, he's not touching the football very much. My biggest concern here are that targets are going to start being split a little bit too much for my liking. We have Amon-Ra, Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta. We know that Demont is eating up touches on the ground as well. This could limit all of their overall ceilings, and we could be trying to chase the guy each week that's going to score the touchdown. We're paying close attention to the availability of Amon-Ra. We would really love him to be 100% going into this game. If he's going in limited, I wouldn't be surprised if he sees a lower snap count and we continue to see a little bit more Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, and Sam Laporta, hoping for Amon-Ra to be 100% healthy to get him back into our lineups. How about for Tampa Bay? I mean, they're coming off their bye week, and here is another question of health, this time with Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With all the other injuries and bye weeks here as of late, a lot of people have forgotten that Mike Evans was injured in the game prior to his bye week against the New Orleans Saints. He left that game early with a hamstring injury, and as of right now, is still questionable to play. If he can't go, all of a sudden Chris Godwin gets an absolutely huge boost in this ballgame because Detroit allows over 30 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Aside from the Evans injury, though, they're pretty healthy in Tampa Bay. We're hoping for clear word prior to game time. We don't want some decoy situation here as well. As of right now, I'm leaning slightly towards Chris Godwin in a decent matchup until we know that Mike Evans is 100% healthy. When Mike Evans is 100% healthy, we know we start 100% healthy Mike Evans in fantasy football. But how about now we head out to LA for the Rams and the Cardinals, and for the Cardinals, it's just one guy we're going to talk about. It's Marquise Hollywood Brown. He's the only one that's fantasy viable in this offense. All that progress that we saw for multiple weeks that was made by rookie wide receiver Michael Wilson was just stripped away by the Arizona Cardinals coaching staff in week 5, where he tied a season low in targets with only 2 and had 18 yards receiving. Meanwhile, Hollywood Brown has seen 10 targets now in 3 of his last 4 games played and has touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 games as well. Going up against the Rams, it's not going to be easy. They allow only 22.1 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. That's 5th fewest in the league. We know this is an offense that just lost James Conner, so there's an opportunity for a little bit more Hollywood Brown in this Arizona offense. Until they can show consistency anywhere else, though, the only guy I'm looking at is Hollywood Brown. Majority of the time, he's going to be inside my top 24 rankings as a wide receiver too. But in matchups like this, difficult matchups going up against the Rams, he's a little bit more of a flex option and maybe a little bit lower in my rankings this week. For the Rams, we got Cooper Kupp and we got Puka Nacua. And it's looking like we're going to have 2 wide receivers each and every week that we can just pencil in from the Los Angeles Rams. No offense, Tutu. He's just not going to see enough volume, and he's going to be a little bit more touchdown dependent. Puka and Cooper are going to be the guys getting close to 10 plus targets each and every week. And what do we do with wide receivers who get 10 plus targets a week? That's right, we start them in fantasy football, especially in a great matchup like this one, going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who allow almost 33 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, which is 7th most in the league. Overall, this team in LA is fairly healthy. Kupp looked absolutely dominant in his first game back. Puka was already eating. They feel good enough about Cooper Kupp's health status that they traded away Van Jefferson. They sent him to Atlanta. These are easy ones for me. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, low-risk guys that I'll probably start each and every week. But now we head out to the Jets and the Philadelphia Eagles, and for Philly, we know that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, they're almost basically weekly must-starts. At least A.J. Brown is, but as of late, Devontae Smith has been disappointing in 2 of his last 3 games played. Now, it's not really something that Devontae Smith is doing wrong. It's just others are going off around him. A.J. Brown has had 3 straight monster weeks over 125 yards receiving. And then last week seemed to be Dallas Goedert's coming out party of 2023, where he saw 9 targets, 8 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. But now they're going up against the Jets, and they're pretty tough against opposing wide receivers. They allow only 17.8 fantasy points per game, 2nd fewest in the league. Philly, overall fairly healthy, but this is what I'm looking at for this ball game right here. A.J. Brown is going to see a lot of sauce in week 6. Could this be a Devontae Smith style week where they can't hyper-focus on A.J. Brown and they really try to get Devontae Smith going as well? I can definitely see that happening this week. It would not surprise me whatsoever. For the Jets, we got Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson just had 3 catches for 54 yards against the damn Denver Broncos defense. It's not going to get much easier than that the rest of the season. It just kind of feels like at this point, he's doomed to hurt us more than help us in 2023, and I hate that. The fact that he only has 1 game all year with double-digit targets, hasn't had over 60 yards receiving in a game in 3 weeks now, and half the targets he gets aren't even catchable. Now on top of that, he's playing Philadelphia this week. They allow 37.2 fantasy points per game. That's absolutely huge, but I will be shocked if the offensive line in New York can hold up long enough for wide receivers to get open down the field. This offensive line just lost offensive guard Elijah Vera Tucker last week, and Garrett Wilson just isn't going to find a week this season where he's going to be safe. It's super hard to sit him each and every week because of the potential upside he has, especially with all the injuries and bye weeks that we're dealing with. But there are a lot more safer options out there. I get a lot of people asking, hey, what about Garrett Wilson or Brandon Ayuk? Almost every single time right now, it'll be a guy like Brandon Ayuk. Just remember, it's not a Garrett Wilson problem, it's an overall offense and quarterback problem, and that's why there is so much risk there each and every week, even in good matchups. Like this should be a matchup that we want to start our wide receivers against. It's way easier to throw on Philly than it is to run on Philly. But I just can't, if the dude can't do it against the Broncos, I got concerns, right? All right, let's now head out to Buffalo for the Buffalo Bills, New York Giants. We'll start off for New York because that one is easy. I'm not interested in anyone here. There is no true wide receiver 1, and a lot of people make a big deal out of who's the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. Nobody cares. Who's producing on the field, that's all that matters. I don't care about titles. The Buffalo defense is banged up though, but they still have enough to handle this offense of the Giants. Daniel Jones is also questionable to play, but it's not like I'm overly worried about that because I wouldn't be starting any of these guys no matter who's at quarterback. Their offensive linemen are blocking their own damn players. That's bad. That's a hard pass for everyone in New York. For Buffalo, total opposite in Buffalo, right? We know that Diggs is a weekly must start. He's the current wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy football and has scored 15 plus fantasy points now in 3 straight ball games. But what about Gabe Davis? He has a touchdown in 4 straight games and just had his first 100-yard receiving game of the year. The Giants allow over 31 fantasy points per contest, 10th most in the league. Both the tight ends in Buffalo right now are questionable to play in Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. And if they can't go, you have to think we see even more Gabe Davis. Now, he is going to be a little bit more boom or bust than Stephon Diggs, but at this point, at worst, a flex play for a team in need. I don't hate it this week for Gabe Davis. Which will then take us to the last game of the week, the Los Angeles Chargers and Dallas Cowboys. And for Dallas, well, we all sit back and we watch this Dallas offense continue to struggle. We also see minimal targets going the way of CeeDee Lamb. And then we come out here and we hear Jerry Jones saying, well, we want to spread it around more. We like to get the ball to the tight ends. Jerry, it ain't working. Jerry, I mean, we can see it from here, Jerry. I know you can see it from your luxury box there. It ain't working. We need to get more balls to CeeDee Lamb. But Dallas knows that CeeDee Lamb is frustrated right now. Mike McCarthy knows that he's frustrated as well. And we all know about the squeaky wide receiver and how they usually get the grease. Well, the fact that Michael Thomas has 4 more targets on the season than CeeDee Lamb is just plain dumb. But this is a perfect opportunity for them to right the ship because they're going up against the Chargers defense, who allows 40 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. That is the most in the NFL. The offensive line right now in Dallas is a walking tape job. They're going to have to force the ball to CeeDee Lamb if they want to have a chance in this ball game. But if this matchup doesn't lead to a big CeeDee Lamb type of day, it's time to start worrying a little bit about CeeDee Lamb rest of season. This is an absolute smash matchup. Everything says that he should go off in this ball game. If he doesn't, there's a problem that needs to be addressed going forward. But what about his opponent down in LA? And really, Keenan Allen is the only guy I'm paying attention to for the Chargers. Quentin Johnston, love the talent, love it a little bit more later in the season. Right now, we haven't seen him get more than 2 catches for 18 yards in a game. As for Josh Palmer, their game in week 4 prior to the bye had 77 yards receiving, but 51 of them came on just 1 play. And as great as that is that he showcased his big play ability, that's not something we can rely upon each and every week to have him get. Keenan Allen, on the other hand, has 44 targets through 4 games played. That's 11 targets per contest, which means what? Yep, over 10 targets per game. He's a weekly must start. But don't forget about that ceiling. He has a matchup winning ceiling too. In week 3, 20 targets, 18 catches for 215 yards. Keenan Allen is absolutely tearing up the league as of right now. And I think last week we kind of saw that this Dallas defense is a little bit fraudulent, right? They benefited from earlier in the season playing some cream puff offenses, but the first time they were truly tested by Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers, they got torched. Now, this could also be the week that Austin Ekeler returns, which actually helps Keenan Allen, right? It gives the defense something else to focus on. They just can't ignore the running game if Austin Ekeler is there in the backfield. But don't mistake what I'm saying for me not liking Josh Palmer or Quentin Johnston. I expect those roles to kind of figure themselves out over the next couple of weeks, and then down the stretch, one of those guys could turn into a huge fantasy asset that we want to start each week. As of right now, really torn between the two. They're kind of going to split opportunities, so until we see a little bit more consistency, Keenan Allen is the guy in LA. All right, that's going to go ahead and do it for my wide receiver start and sit video here for week 6. If you have some other questions about who you should be starting, don't forget our rankings videos come out on Thursdays, so be sure to stay tuned for that. We also have to hit our like goal, right? I know there's a lot of people out there that want this Jalen Hurts signed jersey right here, 3,000 likes. I'm going to pick a random commenter from down below, so be sure to leave that comment down below in the comment section. Looking forward to giving that away, but I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.